Welcome back to This Week in Soccer. It's only week 2, but already we're bringing in new guests and new topics. But there are the stalwarts as well. Kartik, welcome back.
Good to be with you, Lawrence.
As always, it's wonderful to have you. And of course, Richard Farley as well. Richard, you're kind of getting back into this very slowly.
Kind of slowly, but this is a good second step.
I'd imagine so. And someone taking their first/second or third step. They've been on EPL Talk and World Soccer Talk a few times before. Stefan Szymanski, welcome back.
Hi, thank you very much for having me back on.
It's wonderful to have you. And of course, we're kind of shaping the show a little bit around you tonight, Stefan. We've got 3 topics to come up. Of course, first up, financial fair play, following your FT article. We're going to be talking World Cup 2022, and finally technology in football. So some fairly contentious subjects in there. But we're going to start with the financial fair play. And Stefan, the reason we kind of got into this was because of your article in FT. For the people that didn't see that, would you just mind giving us a quick summary?
Right. So what I was arguing in the FT article was that the introduction of financial fair play rules are going to change European football in quite a dramatic way, and to my mind, it's taking us very quickly, I think, into what ultimately ends up to be an American-style closed league system. So, and the reason I'm saying that is because I think what financial fair play does is going to ossify the system. So the way I think it's going to work is that the big clubs at the top are essentially going to be insulated from competition from new rivals, because nobody will be able to put in the outlay that's required to reach a level where you can compete at the very highest level. And what that means is, I think that the competitions across Europe increasingly become just the preserve of a few big clubs. Some people would say that's been true already, but one of the things I think it does is, because the opportunity for smaller clubs to compete more or less totally disappears, it means that the big clubs are going to make more money. And I think once, as this moves on, I think they recognize you have a 2-tier world, 2 interest groups, and the interest group of the big clubs will just get together and say, you know what, why don't we just play amongst ourselves? It's really not worth continuing to keep this phony hierarchical structure with promotion relegation, which really doesn't affect us. And so you end up in an American closed league system. I would say almost de facto we are coming into an American closed league system anyway, because I don't think any smaller clubs can realistically compete with the dominant European clubs. But I also think that with American owners who come into, in particular, the Premier League, and now we have 6 American owners in the Premier League, I think those guys know full well the difference between a closed system and an open system. They absolutely would prefer to have a closed system, and I think financial fair play is kind of creating the alibi for them to say, right, okay, well, let's just do away with promotion and relegation altogether. Let's go to a closed system, and we'll lay on more regular competition amongst the top European clubs and dispense with some of the increasingly meaningless competitions between the big guys and the little guys.
Kartik, I know that your initial reactions to this article were actually really interesting because, you know, of your feelings working in the NASL, working in the MLS, and of course supporting English and European clubs. What were your kind of initial thoughts?
I thought he was spot on. Honestly, this is something I have spoken about amongst colleagues and friends for a number of years, that I think as financial fair play weeds out the playing field, prevents, let's take England, for example, the league that I think most of our viewers may be most familiar with, weeds out the Aston Villas and the Sunderlands and the Newcastles, Everton, clubs with lower economic bases of fans. Even though they have massive support, they cannot compete in the world of Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City, Tottenham, as far as revenues, as far as ticket prices. We see how Arsenal is able to fix their ticket prices to an astronomical level, which would not be possible for a club in the Midlands, would not be possible for a club in the Northeast. And this process has already begun. And I think with more and more American owners, and with the continued concern among some of those American owners about the potential of relegation, or the potential of an open league system, wanting to protect their revenues, protect their investments, we're probably on our way down this road as it is. And again, I mentioned many times on this program and on other programs my dislike of financial fair play, because I think it is something that just benefits the larger clubs. I think it was concocted largely with the support of the big clubs, of the Bayerns and the Real Madrids and the Liverpools and the Manchester Uniteds, and was seen as a way to close off European competition, close off UEFA competitions, the Champions League and the Europa League, from upstarts, from outsiders.
Well, I find it quite interesting, first of all, Stefan, that, I mean, you wrote it in FT. I know that, that's not an unusual thing to kind of cross over platforms nowadays. But increasingly, we're seeing the crossover between money and football, and the debate increasing, etc. I'm just kind of, wondering how you think the money has influenced these leagues, and whether it is actually kind of a money-based decision, or, the kind of the morals that come out of that, in a sense.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things is, again, if you look at the evolution of the American system, I mean, one of the things I think is that from the get-go, people who ran clubs in the United States recognized or treated the enterprise as a business and talked of it as a money-making venture. Sure, they were selling entertainment, and to be entertaining was very important, but that was with a view to making money as well. And one of the things I think about the United States is that Americans never see if you like, a dichotomy between making money and creating entertainment or making a good product. They see the one as following from the other. If you make a good product, then you'll make money. That's the whole story. And when I say going back to the beginning, I mean in the 19th century. I think when the National League in baseball started, I think people it was always a business enterprise, and nobody ever had a problem with that. But even in those early days, it was a very small business. I mean, it really was tiny, and it's only broadcasting which brought money into the sport. And you can talk about how radio before the Second World War made a big difference, but then TV broadcasting and obviously the rise of the NFL in the 60s and 70s brought the big bucks into it. And one of the things that didn't really change the managerial structure, didn't really change the organizational structure, because it started out as a small business with a view to making money, and then it became a big business with a view to making money. Now, I think the interesting thing about European football is there is a change of ideology that's involved here, and not the normal one that I think people imagine either. So there was a lot of commercialism in European football in its early days as well. Certainly in England there was, and to some extent in other countries, I think. And I think a lot of people know that English football clubs were set up as limited companies from the 1880s onwards. So it's not exactly a relatively new phenomenon. But I think what changed was there was never any money in football, and so those who wanted to have this sort of idealistic view of football clubs as really clubs, as something where the members take control and so forth, they could really, that in some sense had a credible basis for most people, because there wasn't very much money into it. And I think what's interesting is what happened in the 60s and 70s, which I've described as the cult of the manager, where, again, because there was no money in it, managers of clubs who were originally very unimportant people, and very much the board of, in England, it was the board of directors who picked the players to play on the field on a Saturday, not the coach.
Damn Shankly.
That's right. Well,
the
Shankly,
communist.
Busby, these guys stepped in and they created this cult where they were the people who run it, and they pushed the board of directors into the background, and they became unimportant people and really just the rubber stamp. And I mean, Brian Clough is the kind of classic example of this, where he basically ran the clubs that he worked for. He couldn't work for the big clubs because he couldn't share power with anybody, and he ran the money. And the famous line, "Cloughie likes a bung." If there was a transfer, you had to pay Brian Clough his cut as well. That was, in some ways, that was this high point of the cult of the manager, and the point being that financially football was such a small business that it really didn't matter. There were no, okay, Cloughie was taking a few grand off the top, who cared? It didn't matter. These were not big businesses. And what's changed now since the 90s is that football in Europe has become a big business. And we're not talking thousands. We're not even talking millions anymore. We're talking tens and hundreds of millions. And you cannot manage that with some dodgy guy with brown envelopes taking cash on the top. You have to have proper accounting procedures. You have to have proper financial oversight. And that's where that has led to this, and I think also you can no longer have this romantic view that a club is run by its members or the fans control the club. That's just not realistic anymore, and they become really commercial enterprises. And in this kind of vacuum where these kind of shady managers operate in the past, have stepped in the money men who really are just treating it as a business now. And this is the kind of, obviously, the ideological debate we're in now, where, as I say, de facto it's become a proper business which has to be commercially run and is being run by the people at the top with a business, with a view to making money. And of course the traditionalists who say, no, that's not right, we need to go back to the traditional virtues. And that's the fight that's is playing out at the moment, I think.
And has played out on many podcasts over the past few years. Richard and I clashing, and Kartik and I, and everyone clashing on this podcast about the finances and kind of the morals behind that. And Richard, I'm really interested to find out what you think about this, because I mean, you aren't a traditionalist in that sense, are you? And so you have always clashed with the likes of me over money, who's very much a romanticist on it.
I think it seems like that, and I would definitely agree with your characterization. I think my views end up being a function of the distorted debate that we tend to have. Basically, this is a debate that's being waged between one side, who have stepped in and are arguing the traditionalist point of view that, as Stefan just articulated, but the other side of the debate don't really have an incentive to step to the table and really articulate the benefits of change or benefits of moving to a new system entirely, because they would alienate the people that they depend on to watch on television, go through the turnstiles, and buy kits. But it is, as has been articulated here, a very viable debate. I end up kind of trying to fill the gap in a lot of conversations. One, because I do truly believe that these people who have invested so much money in these teams and continue to operate these teams as a business do have a stake in the conversation. But I think it's a little bit strange for us to kind of anchor this conversation based on a dialogue that really is just fans talking amongst each other. It really is like walking into a prosecutor's office and thinking you know everything about a court case, but the other side isn't even at the table at that point. It's a very, very strange debate.
But I guess it's a debate that almost has to be had, or it's something that almost needs framing. And
I agree.
Just because it doesn't exist, that's almost the way that people get away with, just pushing things through in a sense, because of the pacifism which emerges from lack of knowledge or kind of, lack of empowerment.
I completely agree, but I think it's also a mistake to assume that you hear, like, the debates that happen on podcasts like this, the conversations that happen over social media, or the opinions that get posted on the many blogs out there accurately articulate what the debate actually is. We need pieces like Stefan's out there. We need some conversations like these. And what we really need, and this will happen in time, as people that are in boardrooms, that are in executive positions as clubs, eventually start filtering out of those positions and more into the public eye, we need some people that are able to articulate the views of those clubs and those investors who do potentially want to go to a more closed system. I remember the first time that I heard out of England the notion that some people in management positions would like something closer to MLS's model. And that was 4 years ago. And it was from a very prominent club in England. And at the time, I wasn't really that surprised. In time reflecting on that, what I am more surprised about are that people haven't been able to really empathize with that view. The view financially makes sense.
I think Richard's absolutely right about this strange debate in which there's one side at the table saying something and another side who's absolutely keeping stum and is never going to say anything publicly about this. And I think it does distort things. And I find this in my own writing. So when I feel when I write about this in places like the FT, I get all these abusive comments from people, and
even on FT,
they're saying as if it's something I want, which
Yeah.
I feel myself to be very neutral. I don't really feel strongly. I see costs and benefits on both sides. I probably think on balance, I think a promotion relegation system where businesses don't make large sums of money is actually a better system, better for the fans on the whole. And what concerns me is that fans, because they don't really, I mean, the problem I think in Europe is the fans really don't get how the American system works, and they don't see how they're kind of what financial fair play is sleepwalking them into this American closed system, is that they're going to get something, they're going to wake up one day with something they really hate because they didn't see it coming.
But do you think? I mean, Kartik, I'll be interested to find this out from you. But I mean, do you think that we almost need an almost passive acceptance of what's happening in a sense because of where we're at? There does seem to have to be a more of an acceptance of this sort of thing because of the way that the game has almost, you'd argue, overextended itself.
Right, and I would agree with Stefan and Richard that I think that the debate hasn't been properly framed, and you get a lot of emotional reaction from supporters. And again, when I've talked about this stuff, and I've talked about it openly on podcasts, and I've talked about it openly with people in soccer circles, if you will, football circles in the United States, they seem to think it's a personal preference of mine. It's not. Actually, my personal preference, like Stefan's, is a promotion relegation system, is the traditional structure of English football. But it's just not realistic in this playing field. In this,
Kartik, isn't that part of the problem? Is that people are saying it just isn't realistic, and therefore we're ending up with this passive side of things. People are saying that's not realistic, therefore there is only one system, and therefore we accept that system.
No. I don't think that we're imposing or saying that a system is going to be imposed on English football or continental football. I think what, in fact, the discussion is about at this point is that we're going to see, because of financial fair play and other business aspects of football, the type of owners buying football clubs throughout the continent, particularly in Britain, but particularly in the English leagues, but throughout the continent, you're going to see this gradually happen. Is it going to look exactly like Major League Soccer, a single entity where the league makes all the central authority makes the majority of decisions? No, it's not going to look like that. But is it going to look more like Major League Soccer?
That's the Euros, isn't it? Yeah.
Is it going to look more like Major League Soccer or the National Football League or Major League Baseball than the traditional football league has in England, or the traditional structure of football in Italy has looked? Yeah, in all likelihood it will. So we're not saying that this is the model, take it or leave it. We're saying that there's movement where the train has left the station, the types of people investing in football, the types of businesses even sponsoring football clubs now have put this in motion to where it's inevitable. Now, with the input of supporters, with the input of people who are community-minded, who passionately care about their football clubs and about the sport of football, you have the potential to frame the debate in different terms and come to a happier medium, to some sort of hybrid model. However, if there's no engagement and it's just one romantic view of things, then perhaps that debate will never be had.
I guess that's part of the conclusion of the lack of debate here, isn't it, Richard? Is that it's either, look, you can be involved with this process because it is going forward, or you can almost freeze yourself out by being such a romanticist about it and refusing to accept this. And I guess that the main argument would be that if fans want to be involved, then they need to find a way in a sense.
Well, it is kind of the unspoken thing with sports and speaking to fan bases and marketing your teams. There is an inelasticity to the demand of the people that complain most. So if you have an Arsenal fan who really believes that the English system is right and the tradition should be observed, but then all of a sudden 20 teams break off again and form a closed system in England, the odds of that Arsenal fan stopping, not going to games anymore, or not watching on TV anymore, or not putting money into the club through their various expenditures is actually very low. And it's actually even lower if you think that not only will that person stop spending, but they won't be replaced by another customer. So that's another part of this debate that we don't ever recognize.
Isn't that also part of the problem as well? I know we're almost getting into another debate here, but it's not about the numbers of customers, it's about how much those customers are willing to spend. I went to Wembley the other night and was sat next to someone who markets football, and I said, oh, one of the biggest markets in the world is surely Indonesia, great places like that. And he was like, well, no one cares about them. They don't have any money.
Well, it's not even, at this point, it's not even necessarily what the customers are willing to spend, although that is a viable route as far as a revenue stream. The most relevant revenue streams, and certainly this is the case in the Premier League, and this is the struggle that Major League Soccer is having, is being able to sell your product for the broadcast rights that then the broadcasters then sell advertising against. So where exactly the customers play into that is conceivably, theoretically, is buying what the advertisers are selling them. But the relationship is a couple steps removed. What the Premier League really wants is not necessarily people coming through the turnstiles and buying a kit and buying a couple of drinks and a couple of pies while they're there. I mean, certainly they're not going to turn away that money. They want the broadcast rights to continue to increase.
Pie money is big money, you're right. But Stefan, the interesting thing is, and obviously you almost become a lightning rod for this kind of debate, don't you? Because if you've written the article, like you say, people come back and some abuse, some don't.
Right.
What is the overall dialogue like? Do you find people that are trying to be progressive in a sense and engage you in a way which is looking to move things forward?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm always hard. There are an awful lot of people out there who say, they totally disagree with everything I say, but they think I put it very interestingly. So, and that seems to be that's perfect. If that's the way people feel, then they're happy. I mean, and there are some people who just feel, who obviously, I mean, this is kind of a psychological thing. They obviously feel so threatened and they are so desperate about the loss, they're transferring their anger onto me, and then they just like to abuse. And then there are people who just like to shout and scream anyway. So, you gotta take that in. But I think I'm always struggling. Trying to think of what I'm really trying to say about this, and one of the part of this discussion helped me think about that a little bit as well. And the other thing I feel about this one-sided debate is that the reason that things will go away from the traditional system, the reason that we'll move towards an American-style system is because, in a sense, that is what will be shown to work in terms of delivering revenues, in terms of delivering audiences, in terms of delivering investment, and that's ultimate. And in some sense, that's ultimately that economic argument is the one that will win the day. And what really bugs me about financial fair play is that it is actually a denial of the successes that European football has achieved. See, to me, European football is the most successful sporting product on the planet. In that sense, it's way better than the NFL or Major League Baseball or anything else you can think of, because it delivers this incredibly attractive competition. It attracts all the best stars from over the world. It's absolutely, it produces so many watchable competitions, and the evidence of the last 20-30 years is it's grown like topsy, that the money is kept flowing in because it's such a wonderful product. And you can see it, now I live in America, I can see all the time, the fact that I can go down to any bar and watch Champions League football and know also that there are going to be lots of people around me who know everything about it because it has a huge following here. And I could do that if I was in Hong Kong, and I could do it if I was in Kampala, and I could, anywhere in the world I can go, and it's this hugely successful thing. And the thing is, why is it so successful? And to me, the reason is precisely because it doesn't have those characteristics of the closed American system. It is financial chaos. It is, cutthroat competition. It is, you live on the edge of your seat the whole of the time. It is, you're constantly needing somebody to come and inject money into it. It is the fact that there are all those people just waiting to throw money at this because it's so wonderful, and everybody wants to be a part of it. And financial fair play is just going to deaden all of that. It just puts this lid on everything that says, no more chaos, no more excitement. Let's just have a nice, stable league. We'll have the same procession year in, year out. And to me, what's the difference between that and the NFL or Major League Baseball? It's just a procession, and that's the tragedy to me, that people can't see that they are actually denying what is really great about what we've already got.
This is such an important point because when I've had discussions with people about financial fair play, people who are Sunderland supporters and Villa supporters and Birmingham City supporters, obviously Birmingham City's been through the ringer financially the last few years with Carson Young's problems in Hong Kong, but I've explained to them, they said, oh, isn't this great? This is going to rein in Manchester United and Chelsea and Manchester City. I said, no, in fact, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to make sure your club can never compete. Here's what financial fair play does. And once you lay out the argument to them and explain to them that because of their club's revenues, because of the economic base of their supporters, because of the other circumstances, the European money that constantly comes into Manchester United or Chelsea or Manchester City, Arsenal, perhaps not in the future, but Arsenal to this point, you're in this position where you guys are now stuck in place. And there's no possibility of advancement, and at some point there will probably be a closed league, which won't include Birmingham City or won't include Derby County or Nottingham Forest, these traditional clubs, since we mentioned Brian Clough earlier in this discussion. And it's funny, when I actually sit down and have an intelligent conversation about this with supporters, they begin to see my point of view on it. But the debate has been framed in such a way that financial fair play is this godsend to save the smaller clubs, to save financial sanity in football in Europe. And in fact, I think, as Stefan has outlined in this great Financial Times piece and outlined before, it does the opposite, and it will do the opposite.
I mean, Richard, I'd be interested to know this from you, and you too, Stefan, but is it also slightly missing the point that we're always debating I mean, I know the finances keep the game going, but I mean, Richard, maybe you would be a great one to make this argument. A tiered system, you can still appreciate your football. You know, you're almost having this idea imposed that you have to aspire to be the very top football club in order to enjoy your football, which we know is a motto.
That's clearly not the case. Obviously, everybody defines their own enjoyment by their own terms, and for some people, that is going to be constantly winning or competing for trophies. It's the identity that they accept. But
except for Arsenal fans.
Well, no. As we saw this weekend or heard this weekend from the stands, there's still a number of people who support Arsenal who would like to identify themselves through trophies. But for me, it's all about the football, and if it's a closed system, we're still going to get our football. It's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have different stories. You're not going to have teams that are necessarily going to be able to climb up through the league system, like some great stories of the past. Again, going back to Brian Clough a little bit here. But the product is still largely going to be the same because the world we live in now, we don't see a team necessarily climbing through the lower divisions of Spain and Italy and England and Germany or France and really competing at the top. I guess there are some examples, but it's not a meaningful part of the game that we watch. And every weekend, I tune in to watch the greatest players, some of the greatest athletes in the world play at this extremely high level, and for me, that's not really going to change. We will see some examples of teams that are going to come through. It's going to be a basic closed system, but I think you will have some investors come in, keep their team right at the edge of UEFA relevance until they are at that level for a period of time to where they can then take another step and be within lines of financial fair play, which then becomes a huge distortion. But to me, that's even more of a distortion than what people are talking about now, where you have a team like Monaco, who's got a Russian investor and has been able to vault back to their previous levels of relevance. No matter what, we're going to have distortions. At the end of the day, though, like you're hinting, the football's always going to be there.
It seems like a nice place to conclude the discussion. If you do have any views on this, or you'd like to express yourself, maybe you want to express yourself through a video, you can send us that, or you can, of course, tweet us those all the links, etc., in the description below. Moving on. We're talking about the World Cup, obviously, next up. And Kartik, I mean, you were the main person on the podcast that brought this into our consciousness in a sense. And it was David Bernstein who said that he feels that the World Cup 2022 should be rebid.
I think it's odd. I mean, David Bernstein's made some controversial comments since he's been out as the chairman of the FA, some strange comments, and I have a great fondness for him. I mean, Manchester City, my club, is now in this position it's in because David Bernstein righted the ship when we were teetering on the brink of insolvency many years ago. But rebidding is a complicated process. Rebidding means going out and getting all the hotel contracts again, getting all the stadium vendor deals done again, putting together a bid book, which you have to have binding contracts. Let's say it's the same countries that bid again: Japan, South Korea, Australia, the United States, and Qatar has to submit a rebid. That process is a lengthy process, it's an expensive process, and it's a process that, given the fact that many of those people may have been burned when this decision was made in 2010, let's say in Australia and the United States and Japan, the countries that lost, South Korea as well, it makes it more difficult to put together a new bid. It's not just as simple as saying, hey, we're the United States or we're Japan, we'd like to host the World Cup in 2022. It's not that simple.
And so, Richard, with that in mind, it almost becomes a political statement by Bernstein more than anything else.
Of course it is. I feel like we're going to rehash old ground here. I'll just keep this short and sweet. I really don't want to hear anybody from the United Kingdom or the United States talking about this issue. I want to hear them talk about the issue. I do think that people have a right to say anything. But I personally am not going to take the opinions of people in leadership positions that were bidding for these World Cups that continue to have this view that only certain countries really are prepared to host the World Cup, only certain countries should be deemed viable candidates. It's not that I think every country is equally capable of hosting a World Cup. It's just that every time a nation like South Africa, we went through this so much for 2010, or during the last European Championships, we're right up to the start of the competition. Everybody was saying that these two nations are not capable of doing it. Tournament went off fine. Tournament in South Africa went off fine. Look, you've just cried wolf. I'm just tired of hearing it. I'm just tired of hearing it. Is there a debate to be had? I personally don't think Qatar is a great choice, but I'm tired of hearing this debate from the same people who I just don't respect their views on it.
Yeah, and let's just reinforce this, Lawrence. David Bernstein put in a bid for the 2018 World Cup that did not win. The FA in England put in a bid for the World Cup that did not win. He knows how difficult it is to put together a bid. The idea of putting together another bid for the 2022 World Cup is incredibly complicated, and perhaps it also would give England a second bite at the apple, right?
I don't think they want that though, Kartik.
Yeah, well,
I think they just went, well, there's no time for another bid. Let's give this to England, or let's just give this to the United States.
Right.
I mean, they're able to do it.
It being in the United States or Australia is very much in the comfort zone of the British press. So it's very different than it being in Qatar, right? So so even if it doesn't go to England, it goes to the United States, and they win.
Well,
right?
I don't know
you cannot have a rebid at this point. I'm telling you, it is very difficult to put together a whole other bidding process on a World Cup. It would just have to be awarded based on subjective factors by FIFA. And Richard, I think you're onto it. That's what they want. They want to say, okay, Qatar can't host it, we're giving it to the United States, or we're giving it to Australia, or we're giving it to Japan. There's some place that's more normal, if you will, in the consciousness of some of these people.
Well, I guess that there are political motives in there as well, aren't there? I mean, but those are the kind of things that I imagine. If you invite FIFA and you invite the Olympic committee in, then you're looking to interact with the outside world, and in a very different way as well. But I guess that, do you think there's also slightly, I'm trying to be as positive as possible, but slightly sour grapes, Richard?
Well, of course it's sour grapes, but I just think that part of the problem here is the public continuing to frequent these stories. I mean, it comes down to something we talked about last week. The reason these stories continue to be told, and the reason why journalists continue to be asked, is there a chance for 2018 or 2022 to end up in the United States, is because the public is interested in this. My big problem here is that people aren't stepping up and kind of telling an accurate story and going, no, this isn't going to happen. Instead, it's like, well, David Bernstein said this, or look, they're going to have to build all these stadia here, so I don't know. The more accurate story is, it is highly, highly unlikely that 2018 is going to be anywhere but Russia, and it's highly, highly unlikely that 2022 is going to be anywhere but Qatar. So although you want to hear another story, and although you are insatiable regarding the scandal here, I'm sorry, the accurate point of view here is that we should move on.
I'm sorry, but we cannot just yet. Although we will in just a second. Well, Richard, one question I do want to ask. I want to ask, I mean, this is financially motivated in many ways as well. Do you think that this is also, I mean, in a sense, we were talking about, maintaining a hierarchy just a moment ago. In many ways, this is much about doing the same with this.
Yeah, I think it like sorry about that, Kartik. I think, like you said, it's politically motivated in the sense that England in Europe has been the traditional power. Sepp Blatter has consolidated his power by consolidating political wealth around the world, and so he's rewarded the different regions throughout the world because of that. And yeah, so it's no surprise that people have had power taken from them from the time that João Havelange was elected president of FIFA, are still trying to get that back.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Stefan, I know that you haven't been privy to all of this conversation because, unfortunately we lost your connection for just a second there. But I'd be interested to get your thoughts. So far we've kind of spoken about the idea that this is just a political statement to some extent, and also, therefore, that in many ways the debate's almost invalid. But what's your view on when it comes to a rebid and this almost political posturing for the same sort of hierarchy that we were just speaking about, which plays out in a slightly different stadia, but over the same sort of finances? Sorry, Stefan, you might need to unmute your microphone.
Yeah. How's that? Is that better?
That's much better. You can start. Just leave it for a few seconds and start whenever you want.
So I think the first point is that the background to this debate is the increasing realization that a summer World Cup in Qatar is not viable, and I think that's really the key issue here. So, of course, I don't think the Qataris have necessarily conceded that that's true, but I think it seems to me more likely than not that that is the case, and therefore the question is what then? So, and it seems to me that the obvious alternative that has already garnered quite a lot of support is a midwinter World Cup, and the question is there enough support for that? And one of the things that there are some countries that stand to lose very badly from a midwinter World Cup, and the obvious one is actually England, where it has this long-standing tradition of playing over the midwinter period, and in particular, I mean, the great tradition of Boxing Day football, which goes back to 1889. So I mean, it really would be sad to see that lost. However, the question is whether England has enough power on its own to preserve its interest. And one of the things I was trying to find out, before the program, I was trying to research and say, well, what are the rules about this, and where does it say in the rules that the World Cup has to be in the summer, or what dates it has to be in? To be honest with you, I couldn't find the rules. Doesn't mean to say there isn't one, and we probably need a lawyer to track this down. Yeah. But the impression I get is that this is something that is agreed by the Football Committee of FIFA. The Football Committee of FIFA is responsible for the scheduling of all the games throughout the season, and of course there's all the conflicts between national teams and club teams, leagues, friendly internationals, and so on. All of those issues come up, and there are some stuff on the FIFA website where they talk about how they've reached these agreements, and what you can see when you read those documents is that just agreeing anything is a huge hassle. They have enormous problems getting a consensus on what the timetable is, and I think that's one of the reasons why the English are probably trying to argue that it's not feasible to have a midwinter World Cup, because if just agreeing the regular schedule is so difficult, even though that's fairly well established now as to how it works, the idea of then disrupting everything, I would think that the bottom line is that the English can probably get a big enough blocking coalition together to say, no, you can't really reschedule to midwinter. And then if that's the case, then the conclusion must be that they have to rebid, because you can't hold it midwinter, you can't hold it in the summer. So I think the real debate is, can you reschedule to midwinter?
Yeah, actually, Lawrence, I want to step in here, because I want to step back from something else I said when kind of said, well, we should move on from these inaccuracies that are being reported in the media. I want to limit that to just regarding Qatar hosting the World Cup. Basically, I think, like Stefan says, the more viable discussions here are the mechanics of that, when exactly they are going to do it. Is it viable to host it in summer?
Do you think that at all? I mean, I can feel David Bernstein's pain a little bit, which is something that you very rarely will say, and I think that, well, because the initial assumption on the bid would have been, well, this World Cup will happen here. Why wasn't this initially put into the initial bid? All these kind of things. It's like you don't enter into an agreement and then say, yeah, but we actually need it to be this way.
Of course, and I think that's what Stefan was speaking to, and it sounds like he's looked into this more than I have. My research just involves asking people like Stefan who are willing to do more work than I will.
Lazy American.
How I understand it is that all that we have now is that Qatar have won rights to stage something called the 2022 FIFA World Cup, which, by the name of it, you would assume is going to happen in 2022. But when exactly that happens, what the competition format is, even, I mean, is it even going to be the same number of teams? Is it going to be the same number of rounds? All they have is rights to that one commercial entity, and everything else is still up in the air. Now, to me, it seems absolutely ludicrous, looking beyond just Qatar, that we can't find a way to stage a World Cup at another time of year, thereby allowing other places, potentially down the road, to host World Cups when it would be less than desirable to hold it in July. I mean, the United States was a good example where there were tons and tons of issues regarding climate here when we hosted in 1994. Or just look down the road and say, you know, in 40 years, if a place like China or India become viable soccer nations and we want to host it in one of those huge nations for the purpose of growing the sport, when is the best time during their calendar to host one? There should be some flexibility.
Kartik, do you want to step in here at all?
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, I think right now the model, and it's an established model, it works well with the top European leagues, but the model right now has led to, I think, an incredible number of fixtures, breakdown of players, just looking at it from the sporting side, where you're having international competitions begin in the summer in June, right after European competitions end. The Champions League final is generally that last weekend of Saturday in May now. It used to be on a Wednesday. And you're going right into national team camp. You're going right into an international competition, and then you're going right from there into, if you go the distance, if you're Holland or you're Germany or you're Spain, you're going deep in these tournaments, you're going right from there to a 2-week vacation, kind of a forced vacation before you join up with your club for preseason training. So anything that would give the calendar more flexibility on 4, I don't know if that necessarily means having a Winter World Cup. Obviously, in Qatar, it may be forced upon us because of climate issues in the Middle East and in the desert in the summer. But I think that the scheduling, though it's working now, is leading to problems from the competitive standpoint, from the sporting side. It's working from the business standpoint, but it's not working from the sporting side as far as I'm concerned.
And as Gabriele Marcotti is pointing out frequently now, we do kind of have a Winter World Cup coming up next year.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I guess also the point here would be, Simon, that you're going to need to add extra chapters to your Soccernomics book as to why England won't win the World Cup.
Well, yeah, a midwinter World Cup might be another good excuse, although it's not really hard to find them on the whole. But I think again the deeper question here is one of what should we shift to accommodate whom, in the sense that, you know, is the World Cup the most important football competition in the world? Is it really? I mean, who suffers more if we disrupt the schedules of all of the European leagues and the Champions League? Who have we harmed the most? It seems to me that it's the European leagues and the Champions League which is actually the product that people really want to watch. And I don't know, the World Cup is very successful, but that's just because football is incredibly successful. Actually, and surely most of us and most commentators say, you know, the quality of competition in the World Cup has been declining decades. It's really not that great a competition. Most of it's pretty boring. The final's always boring. So you could say it's a sour grapes Englishman speaking here. Maybe that's true. But in that sense, I question the logic that says that we must disrupt everybody else's schedule in order to accommodate the World Cup because the World Cup's the most important thing in football. I don't think that's true.
That makes so much sense. Imagine how how spectacular Champions League is going to be come 2021 or 2022.
Right.
If the trajectory continues, that
it
is
will have
going to
imploded in itself.
Well, we've been talking about this since the late 90s, that the international game was taking a backseat in relevance to the club game, which is why I am, to echo Stefan's point, I'm kind of surprised we continue to have these debates. And I think as time goes on, you're going to see the club game continue to be the dominant factor in world football. And again, my position on maybe rescheduling a World Cup is based on the competitiveness of the club game, because part of the reason the World Cup is, I think, such a poor competition footballing-wise is because it comes at the end of a long European season, when there are other goals in mind for players and for the football clubs they play for and the football clubs that pay them, which national teams they pay them a little bit. They get a stipend and such. But so that's a big part of it. I think, again, anything that would improve the competition, the competitive level of both the international competition and European club competitions, I welcome. And that means we have to be open to ideas about moving it. There's no hard and fast rule that says the World Cup has to be in the summer months. It was in the summer months in a different environment, just like we talked about financial fair play in the first segment, and some of the romanticism about club football in Europe and in England in particular. That was a different time. That was a different playing field. The global game hadn't developed to the stage it has now at that time when these precedents were set.
Yeah, this is obviously a very adaptable time, and for that reason, we have to be very adaptable on World Soccer Talk and actually draw up our third subject. But before we leave, it would be great, Stefan, obviously a lot of people are going to know you from Soccernomics and some of your more recent writing in a lot of different places, obviously. But just for a few people, would you mind just filling them in on, what's going on for you at the moment?
Oh, right. So yeah, I'm well now. I moved to Michigan a couple of years ago. So I've spent most of my all my life up until then as an academic in the UK, really. So although now when I say University of Michigan, everybody assumes I'm an American, and so I just don't know anything about the game. A series of non sequiturs.
Yeah, welcome to our world.
Yeah, I can relate to that. For sure.
Yeah, I feel your pain. I tell you, it's crazy the amount of prejudice there is. But I'm very settled here now, and I have quite a large research program developing. Most of my research, or a large part of my research, that's certainly out there in the public domain at the moment is centered around financial fair play and insolvency. I've been working on a very large database of English clubs, which I've now extended back to 1958. So I have over 50 years of data, and really I'm interested in the financial ups and downs and why clubs get into trouble and how they get out of trouble, why some get into more trouble than others. Those are really very interesting issues to me. I also have a PhD student about to start work with me, and I've got a number of kind of issues that I'm hoping to work with him looking at, and I want to look at some of the sort of try and start looking at some of the more of the Moneyball issues that obviously everybody's interested in. The numbers game, which I'm sure you mentioned, I expect you're going to review at some point, which I think is a very interesting book, and actually has been doing wonders for the sale of Soccernomics, because people are buying the two in a pair, and so that's great news. And I think it's great that's come in, and I'm going to be. I want to do some more work about that. So I'm looking at more at the game by game level data. I'm looking at some issues about trying to look at, say, value on the pitch. What's the value of the teams on the pitch at any one given point in time, and trying to see how if that is related to outcomes. And so I've got some projects along those lines coming on. And just finally one little one, which I hope. Is again for Americans. I hope they will appreciate this. I want to get a research an undergraduate to help me out doing a bibliographical search, and I want to document for people something that I know to be fundamentally true, but most people seem not to know, that soccer is a name given to the game by the English in the 1890s, and was until the 1990s the absolutely commonplace name for the game in England. not football, soccer. We called it soccer. It's an English word, and it was, and it's now become this bizarre theory that it's an American word, and that saying the word soccer demonstrates you know nothing about the game of football, which is just such nonsense. But I'm going to go through every book published in the British Library since 1900 to prove to people that this is absolutely the standard word, and hopefully put down some of this nonsense for good.
Well, Stefan, the dismaying thing might be that you've just started the biggest debate in the comments section below.
Yeah.
Well, I have bibliographic data on my side. I can prove it.
God.
For example, Sir Matt Busby's autobiography, published in 1974, was called My Life in Soccer. Not football, soccer. And if it's good enough for Sir Matt, it's good enough for me.
It's a really good point, because America, of course, didn't exist in 1974 as well, so
that must be what it was.
Yeah. Stefan, it's been wonderful to have you on the show. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. If people want to find you on Twitter, whereabouts do they need to go?
Oh, so my Twitter is @SSZY, which a friend of mine said that sounds like you're going to sleep. So I'm easily found there, and of course the Soccernomics blog. I hope people would take time to have a look at that, where a lot of in-depth discussion about financial fair play, and as well as some really bizarre arguments about Rangers as well, which gets people completely over the top. But thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on, and been a pleasure to chat. Nice to talk to you, Karthik and Richard as well. So thank you very much.
And as always, thank you very much, Karthik. It's been wonderful to have you. Hopefully we'll see you next week. And obviously there's much more to come from you. You've got new series, etc. coming.
Right, yeah. There's a new series called Voices of Soccer that we're launching, I believe, today. First interview will be with Ricky Hill, former Luton Town legend and England international, about racism and conquering racism in English football. So stay tuned for that. That should be coming out momentarily.
In the past. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is wonderful. And of course, Richard, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys.
It's good to have you. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us on the second episode of This Week in Soccer. If you've got any comments, of course, leave them below. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we will see you very soon.